Welcome to the GoodViral podcast. Today, we are going to flip the script on the doomsday gossip and bring you stories of hope, resilience, and real change. In a world filled with anxiety, climate disasters, and 24/7 bad news, how do you stay hopeful? How do we shift from feeling overwhelmed by the problems to actively believing we can be part of the solution? Today's episode is all about finding light in the darkness. We're diving into how communities around the world are tackling some of the biggest challenges head on, and we're asking, what if you could be the hero in the world dominated by villains? What if optimism, not fear, is the key to creating lasting change? We'll share stories that will inspire you to see beyond the headlines, stories of people and organizations making a real impact. And here's the best part. By the end of this episode, you'll have tangible ways to take action and spark positive change in your own life and community. So, are you ready to go from hopeless to hopeful, from passive observer to active changemaker? This is GoodViral. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome everyone to another episode of the GoodViral podcast. Today we have another Host2Host episode between Demian and myself. And today we are really talking a lot about our feelings in a way, especially with what we do with GoodViral and how it's helped us. And Demian, please tell us, what do you think we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah. I mean, this is a really interesting topic. I'm really excited to talk about it because I was thinking about one of our recent podcast guests, Gus Hervey from Future Crunch. He does a good news newsletter. He's starting a new podcast also, and just did an amazing TED Talks. And one of the things he mentioned is how he studied basically like environmental studies with PhD, and he got really, really depressed because basically all there is out there is bad news. You know, it's like, I remember in my lifetime, I was thinking about this when I was a kid. I remember thinking that air and water were unlimited. And the way that people were acting, basically, the way they would throw trash, out of the window of the car, it was basically like, pretty much that was the mentality. And so just in our lifetime, basically, like the world has come to a realization that it's very much finite. It's a finite world that we live in, and even fresh water is something that many people don't have access to it, as we know from another one from our podcast guest, Charity Water. But the idea that 2/3 of the planet is covered with water, and so water is unlimited, it doesn't mean that it is unlimited. So the fact is that basically this is what our topic is about. It's about anxiety and depression, basically, due to all the bad news about basically our existence here on this planet. It's many people feel guilty, feel bad, feel like I can't have children or bring children into the world, or I can't justify what I do every single day because I know that I'm destroying the planet, or there's a lot of sort of loathing for other people because of the destruction to the planet or the destruction of the planet by other people. And basically everywhere you turn, especially when we're talking about environmental things, everything is just bad news, right? And so the question is, how do you live with that kind of, in a world with that kind of anxiety, or, basically, what do we do? And I've got some ideas, but before, I want to hear what you have to say. So, what do you think about this topic?
Well, it's actually funny because when I speak with my family, like my mother or sister, this topic comes up often when, especially with my mother, because she's a different generation. She's the baby boomer generation, and she kind of grew up with an infinite idea of world resources, right? But she also was kind of a hippie girl in the 70s, right? So it was this eat organic, don't eat too much meat. Like there were kind of some signs happening in the 70s. So she kind of gets what I talk about a lot. And when, I'll just say a stat, in 2040, I think it was, we're going to have a water crisis and, all these things that tend to pop up. And she just kind of sits there and she says, "I'm so sorry." And she just apologizes for the fear and anxiety that we're dealing with, and then the potential problems that we will have if we continue down this path. And it just kind of pops up a lot. And depression, anxiety, I think is definitely something that is present today. You know, before we popped on, I was like, how much anxiety and depression escalated just because of COVID-19, right? 25% worldwide by the WHO organization said had increased. So 25% now have more anxiety and depression. You know, that's a large number worldwide. And it's not just because of COVID. Obviously, it's a lot of the climate change issues, job market issues, but all of this together comes with the idea of the bad news. And like you said, when environment happens, that's all we hear about, right? Is destruction. And we don't hear about all the millions of trees being planted every day, or, you know, the banks being held accountable for deforestation, and, you know, all these wonderful stories that you and I have been able to experience through the organizations we've been interviewing on this podcast. And so, you know, that's one side of it, is that, yeah, we have all this bad news. And then we also have things like Future Crunch that shows us the amazing things that are happening that, of course, big media are not showing to us because they feel like that stuff doesn't sell, right? Drama tends to sell, that they think. And, you know, here's another thought too. There's been lots of conversation, and I know this is a hot topic all over the place, artificial intelligence, right? And there's this guy who is the COO of Google, Mo Gadot, I believe I might be saying that wrong, but Mo Gadot. He's a CEO of Google. He's a huge engineer, published author, has helped over 50 million people find happiness. And he knows a lot about this AI stuff. And so this is the guy that's like, if you're feeling anxious, he can help you not feel anxious, especially about artificial intelligence. And he said that the only reason why we should fear AI is if we train it to fear us. And the only way we train AI to fear us is either to purposefully give it the reason of destruction, or AI looks all over the internet, scours people's behavior on social media, the news, etc., and it decides how its sentient being is going to be as artificial intelligence. So our humanity is how artificial intelligence shows us who we are. And so I think this is an opportunity right now for us to say, hey, we don't want artificial intelligence to, you know, judge itself to be on kind of the bad side of humanity. We want artificial intelligence to be inspired by the good side of humanity. And so it's really up to us to decide how we consume our information and who we decide to listen to. So that's kind of the piece that I think that our podcast helps with is there's the personal development, the business development. There's all these different podcasts that to help you be a better person or with your career. But there's not a lot about what's good in the world and why you should be happy about that versus the depression and anxiety and constantly having to fight that piece of life. And so I think our podcast does help with, I think it does, because we talk to the heroes that are creating solutions to these problems.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. There's really there's something interesting that I wasn't really expecting with this podcast, sort of our experience as we've gone along and we've met so many different people. And one thing that it's really amazing to me is that every single one of our guests, these are all people basically that are involved with really important things, you know, things that, you know, you could view as big problems, you know, in the world. And yet every single one of them always has such a strong, you might say, streak of optimism. They have such a strong feeling of optimism, and they express that in our episodes, that they, you know, they're hopeful for the future and what we can accomplish. And that's really interesting because, you know, when you're you know, just living a normal life, you know, you can say, well, there's good and there's bad in the world, right? But when you're direct face to face with, you know, for example, the destruction of the Amazon, when you're face to face with, you know, trying to save the last elephants or the last gorillas, when you're, you know, in an area, right? And when you're doing these things, it seems like a battle that we just cannot win, and yet the people that are actually doing it are optimistic. And so this you know, reflectively makes me think about my life and everything that I'm doing. For example, when I talk about this, so many of our listeners, I'm sure, can relate to this feeling of you know, that I personally am helping to destroy this planet, right? And so, you know, how do we live in with that kind of feeling? And what it causes me to do is to say, hey, look, all I can do is the best that I can do. I can put my best effort forward, my best, it's like if you're going to be playing, for example, tennis against the best player in the world, right? You're not going to go out there and just give up. Even if you lose, you're still going to give the best that you can give. And that's what we're really here doing. I feel like on this planet, each one of us is that, yeah, things are happening that are difficult, but we're going to put our best foot forward. And the people that I know, the people that I now know through this podcast, and the people that I basically believe in are the people who are saying, hey, yeah, we can do this. We can make things better for the next generations instead of worse. We don't have to be always sad about the way that we're leaving the planet to our children and our grandchildren. We can be happy about their futures, And so really, what it comes down to for me is I think our biggest responsibility as individuals is to, I've been using this expression a lot lately. It's carve out a piece of happiness for ourselves, right? So in our own lives, try to find happiness in whatever way that we possibly can for ourselves. But along the way, we make sure that happiness includes interactively helping other people, helping animals, help the planet. Because what I found out is that, I don't have to just go out and go drinking with friends and have dinner to have a good time. I can also have a good time doing things that are actually helpful for other people, and like, for example, one of our soon to be released guests from the Great Barrier Reef Foundation was talking about a kind of ecotourism. It's fantastic. They've got an amazing new scientific discovery, basically, that they can replant coral in dead coral reef, right? So something that's revolutionary. And so now people can take holidays, literally go there, enjoy swimming around in the beautiful waters, right? And snorkeling, scuba diving, a beautiful scene, and you can plant coral reef, and this could be a holiday. So you can really, in other words, you can enjoy doing something good. And so carving out happiness can include this. You and I were talking recently about this sense of community. That's another thing this podcast has done for me is that our guests are from all over the world, and here we are in two different parts of the world right now, you and I, and yet the sense of community is not just anymore the neighborhood that I live in, like it was when I was a kid, when we use that word community. It's not just the city that I live in. It's not just my country. I feel like, especially when we're talking about global problems that we're all experiencing, the community is the world. It's everybody in it, and this, and these things that we're talking about, it's the connection to the community. And so we can have a sense of community to the whole world and do good things and still be happy, So, I mean, what are your thoughts about all that?
Well, I think you hit a lot of points. The piece that I find is inspiration, of course, from all the stories that we're hearing from the good causes and charities, and inspiration to do things differently. Now, when people think, because you're talking about plastics, you're talking about animals, doing things differently means recycling and, eating less meat. Yes, but also it means just really doing things differently, like what you're talking about, ecotourism, right? Normally people think, oh, I'm going to go to Cancun for a weekend and I'm going to sit on the beach and, paraglide or something. That's great. You can also do that at the Barrier Reef and then maybe take a day and also do planting coral reef, which is a whole amazing experience in itself. Or you can go to Africa and volunteer to, play with baby elephants. I don't know, things like that, right? It's like there's such an amazing thing that you can do on top of your vacation or even, with your vacation or separate too. It doesn't matter. It's like doing things differently and maybe shopping differently or talking to people differently. That's something that I've really experienced, with the doom and gloom news is a big one. And, when something happens, people talk about it. All right. I'll spend 5 minutes talking about it. Then I'm going to move on. I get really excited about talking about the guests that we have talked to and the stories I hear from them versus the natural disasters and all the other stuff that's happening in the world. It's a good example is right here in Korea. A U.S. military guy. He ran across the DMZ zone from South Korea to North Korea because he didn't want to basically go back to the States and be put in the brig. So
So
he's like, North
DMZ,
Korea is a better option.
What does that mean, DMZ zone?
Oh, the DMZ, it's the buffer zone between South Korea and North Korea. It's like 30 kilometers, something like that. So he dashed across it to get away and basically AWOL'd himself into North Korea. And people talked about that, of course. South Korea is a small country, so people talked about it a lot. And I'm American, so everyone's like, oh, let's talk about it. And I'm like, I'll talk about it for 5 minutes, and then also I just don't care. I'm just like, he ran across the DMZ zone. Yeah, that's a big problem, and people are going to deal with that. I'm more excited to talk about charity water. Did you know, that they have brought water to 17 million people? Can you imagine? That's half of it's less than half of the Korean population. But I'm just going, that's amazing to me, And I want to talk about these stories, and I talk about them with people, and they get excited about the information, right? So, instead of talking about the shocking and the doom and gloom all the time, I'm wanting to talk about other exciting things that are happening in the world, how people are really creating solutions to problems. And how we can also be included with that. And, so just kind of being inspired by the stories and telling the stories. But the thing is that you have to hear the story first, right? So plugging yourself into that information is unfortunately an active thing you need to do. Getting the doom and gloom information is relatively passive. And so, getting active with Future Crunch as an example, or even with our podcast or other podcasts that are similar, to talking about these topics and interviewing these kind of people is really important because not only does it help inspire you that the world is actually doing pretty good right now, which is I didn't know that really until I got tuned into Future Crunch. Of course, we got lots of things to continue to solve, but there's lots of progress happening, but you don't know about it until you get that information, and being active on that is really key. But once you start hearing about that information, you want to spread that information. Isn't this so cool? Isn't this so crazy? Yeah, I'm going to go to the Barrier Reef myself and plant coral because that is just so cool. People want to be part of solutions. People want to be part of big things that are happening, and restoring a coral reef, saving elephants, or whatever it may be is important. And people want to be part of those important things, and they want to be part of solutions.
Yes.
And so feeling like you're part of the problem is perhaps because you're not actively being part of a solution as well, right? And so, hearing all the doom and gloom, of course, you don't feel motivated or inspired, especially, to continue to try to recycle, to continue to try to do these things, right? It's because the information is negative. It feels like an uphill battle. So shifting how we do things is really how it's changed for me.
Yeah, I've got a another suggestion for people also is that if you really look at your life at your say in a given week, how much of your money do you waste on just non-essential things, right? Literally waste, for example, let's say you're at a market of some sort and you see some extra thing, you're like, oh, I want that. So you just sort of blow a little bit of money. Well, instead of just wasting that money on just random little things in your life, look at taking that money and doing something actually good with that money. Choose a charity you like. Look at some of the amazing things that are being done by some people out there, some organizations, including the ones that we've interviewed and many more. And it's amazing the effect that it will have once you start actually giving towards and contributing towards these organizations in the way that you feel in your battle against basically all the doom and gloom, right? And in other words, I think so many people feel guilty and feel responsible because there's just simply doing very little, to take action towards the solutions, and it's kind of like, it's very easy to ignore, for example, the oceans. When we talk about all the problems in the oceans, that it's out of sight and out of mind for most of us. Of course, the people that are working in the oceans, with the oceans, on the beaches, and working with of course, the wildlife, like Christine Figner with the sea turtles, and of course all the ocean cleanup organizations. What they know, hey, there's some serious problems out there. And for the rest of us, it's out of sight, out of mind. But but think about it this way. What if it was your house, right? So what if you just allowed stuff to just clutter in your house? You just take trash and you just throw it and you let it just sort of get pushed into the corners to where you've got trash all over the house. I mean, people basically feel a sense of responsibility to sort of keep their house clean, right? To pick up after themselves. Most people do anyway, right? And so, but that's the thing with the world, right? Is that how much plastic on a daily basis gets washed into the oceans? Well, that is like a room in our house, like a pretty big one, right? And so, the fact is that if we're going to say, I'm a part of this world, I'm not just a part of my little house, right? But if I'm part of this world, then I'm going to take some responsibility for the fact that a lot of the plastic that I've consumed, has ended up in the oceans. That's my responsibility, right? And so I'm going to contribute, to the organizations out there that are trying to do something about that, right? And so that these are the kind of things I think that it's as I say, carve out a piece of happiness for yourself, yes, but also do it in a way that makes you feel connected to the world at large, right? Makes you feel connected to the people that are doing amazing things, because there's so many of them. It feels like the minority. The reality is because there's so much bad news. It seems like most of news is focused on what the celebrities are doing, right, or what wars are happening, right, or what really horrible things are happening all the time. But when you sort of look past what sells in the media, and you look at what's really happening, there's good stories also every single day. There's loads of them, and there's people who really care, and there's huge shifts in the world of business, like Zufi was talking about with BizG's, another one of our episodes, where he's talking about basically how businesses are shifting to be more responsible and look at the world more and in a collective way than they've ever been before. So businesses are shifting. It's not just organizations that are charitable organizations, but it's happening all across the world. And even organizations that are, I mean, if you look at all of the for example, coal and gas and oil, organizations that you might say are the most entrenched in terms of, yes, they're very, very, very necessary, but they also do a lot of, you might say, environmental damage, right? But even those organizations are taking steps. They're taking steps towards improving things, towards the solutions. So it's in the minds of people. It really is. The problem is that we just don't feel like it, right?
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
I think this kind of goes into the next point I really wanted to bring up is looking for the heroes versus the villains. And it's a theme that's really been stuck in my mind for the last few weeks. I was listening to another podcast. I can't remember which one. But someone had said whenever something happens in the world, even in the news, they always look for the heroes. So if the house burns down, who's the person rushing in to find, the sleeping kid? Or, the World Trade Center, who are the first responders? Or, who are the heroes saving the elephants? Who are the heroes saving the slaves of the world? All of this stuff. And when you say look for the heroes, I think that also looks for the companies who are the heroes too. Companies that are really fighting systems that are really in place, especially plastic systems, slavery systems, all of that, right? We get so inspired with the ocean cleanup project because they're taking all this plastic and they're making sunglasses out of it and they're selling that to help fund the project. It's a huge hero organization, right? On top of all of these charities and these good causes we've interviewed and then some, it's the heroes of the story, but big media news tends to focus on the villains, right? Ooh, Putin of the world, right? What is he doing, right? I mean, there's a reason why humans are so fascinated by villains in history. I mean, if you just look at Hitler, he is one that everybody looks at to go and study when it comes to villains in history. And so there's a fascination in some way of looking at for the villains, right? But it's also one of those pointing fingers kinds of things versus embracing the heroes that are fighting the good fight. And
Right.
I think the world is starting to shift, starting to see we
Mm,
want more heroes, we want more inspiration, we want more people
mm,
who are doing good things for us. The dangers of that, of course, is a villain in disguise as a hero, like
mm,
greenwashing. You get a lot of these big
mhm,
companies
mhm,
saying they're doing something, but it's actually just greenwashing, right?
mhm,
Which means
mhm,
they say they're doing something, but they're actually not doing anything about it. It's just
mhm.
part of the
Right.
marketing. And
Right.
so, being careful about that is always key, making sure your heroes are, in fact, heroes.
Mhm,
But
mhm,
what I love about our podcast is really talking to real life heroes. Like I
mhm,
told you this many times. I've told many people this. I feel like I'm talking to actual heroes, like Bukeni. He literally saves people from slavery. Like, come on,
mhm,
you know
mhm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this is like
Absolutely.
legit superhero stuff.
It
And
is.
so it's amazing to me that we really do focus on the villains, but we don't focus on who's fighting the villains, right? We
Mhm,
don't
mhm,
focus on the
mhm,
people who have the solutions. There are so many solutions out in the world,
mhm,
but we don't hear about them, right?
mhm,
I've heard about so many problems about plastic, about the environment, about slavery, about all these things, and I have not heard much about the solutions, the people actually
mhm,
on the
mhm,
ground doing stuff. I've
mhm,
heard of some
mhm,
things from the UN, but
mhm,
that was it. And that was me searching
mhm.
for things. That's why
Yeah,
I'm so
sure.
grateful about this podcast is for me, it's really brought in the inspiration of the stories, but also finding the heroes in this story,
Mhm, mhm,
focusing on who is creating the solutions
mhm.
versus who's creating the problems. You need to know who's creating the problems, but we need to really focus on the heroes.
Yeah.
And I think that's also for me kind of an energetic place. If I focus a lot on the heroes versus the villains,
Mhm,
then more things happen with the hero that they will succeed, right? So
mhm,
that's giving money,
mhm,
attention, volunteering, sharing, whatever that may
mhm,
be, right?
mhm, mhm.
So I feel like that's really important to point
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. I remember one of the things that impacted me, the probably emotionally impacted me the most of all of our podcasts is when we were doing our interview with Jason from Sleep Trailers. And he said he was driving to work one day, saw all the homeless people, and he's like, oh my God, why doesn't somebody do something about this
Yeah.
problem? And then he realized, he says, wait a minute, I'm somebody, right? And that it gives me chills even retelling the story. And he literally realized that he himself could do something, and that's what, hopefully, I mean, that's what I want to say, and to all of you people listening right now, and I want you to share this with other people that is that you're somebody, and every person out there, whether you realize it or not, you are having an impact on other people every single day, everything that you do, every interaction that you have has an impact. And so, what you do matters, and you can make a decision that you could say, from here until the rest of my life, I'm going to try to make more of a positive impact on this world than what I've been doing. And then, and don't be sad about your failures. Everybody has failures, right? But do the best you can. Put your best foot forward. Carve out a piece of happiness for yourself. But you are somebody, and whatever it is that you have in your mind that you think that should be done, well, step up, get it done. I mean, here it is. We basically are waiting for people like you, right, to step up and to do these things, right? And then one day, it's these kinds of people that made these decisions at some point that now we're interviewing on our podcast, right?
Mm.
And there's exactly the same as you and I, right? Is they simply made a decision that they wanted to do something. And so, the amazing variety of solutions that could happen if people just take this one idea and just say, hey, I'm somebody,
Mm.
and I can do something about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Everyone we've talked to, whether they're just part of the organization or started their organization or project, they said, oh, I can be that person and I can be included in that effort, whether it's just even being a volunteer, donating, or being the head of something. It
Mhm,
reminds
mhm,
me of Transparent's Hands. When we were talking about with her that she was like, my mother was always someone who cared for people, and that inspired
mhm,
her to do more. And she
mhm,
created a whole organization that is literally changing lives and families and saving so many
mhm,
people over there in the
mhm,
Middle
mhm,
East for now. And she's looking to
mhm,
expand. I mean, it's just
mhm,
amazing. And
mhm.
so,
That's right.
again, it's kind of like look for those heroes, and also kind of call the inner hero from within too. They're in there, right? It may not be your job per se, it may not be your total existence, but it is paired to your happiness, is taking action towards something that's good. And that helps you feel good, that helps the people around you, that helps your life, that helps everything. And, I think people are ready, really, in the mass index. I think we're ready to start taking action towards things that we really want to have changed. And it feels good to have that change. In a world that has a lot of doom and gloom, it is hard to see that light in the end of the tunnel. And it's hard to see that light within yourself, too, that you could be part of that solution. But, when you're listening to these stories and you're listening to these people that are heroes on the ground floor, for the most part, doing these acts of service and hearing how they're inspired to keep moving forward, it's easier to be inspired from heroes to be a hero yourself. It's hard to be inspired to be a hero when all you think you see is villains, right? So I'm really excited to see the future of how we go, and hopefully the numbers of depression and anxiety start to go down as we start to call upon and look for those heroes instead of putting villains as such these big things that we can't seem to conquer. It's like, no, we can. Yeah. We just can't do it alone. And so it's a call to action.
I think, absolutely. I think just focusing on the good news and the positive stories, because the bad news is easy to come by, but simultaneously there's great things happening, and so, hopefully this podcast can inspire, our listeners, and therefore the friends and family of our listeners, to say, hey, there's good things happening, and I want to be a part of that, And it is, it's a dangerous and scary world sometimes, but it's also a beautiful and exciting world. And so, it's just, how do we, which part of it do we want to spend most of our time with? Right.
And what was it that you said the other week when we were chatting? You said the world is a stage and we are all the actors in the comedy. It was a trope on Shakespeare. And I liked that because I was like, that's so true. This is it's life. Yeah, take it seriously, but also it's also a stage and there's comedy in it. And we are all the actors on that stage.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like some of the things I do, just even when I'm by myself or whatever, are just absurd. It's almost like I'm in the middle of a comedy, right? It's like, how can this even be real,
Even when you see things on the news, I would argue with that too.
That's right. So,
sure.
That's the problem, isn't it? When people take themselves too seriously, you see so many people trying to hold it together all the time, right? Is that the reality is that we're all just, guessing, we're all just doing the best that we can as we go along here, but there is the secret is doing the best we can, like sort of, that I think it's effort, like one thing I recently heard this, and it's the last thing I'll say basically is that, the work and the effort that you have to put in, the struggle, you might say, it will literally never end. It'll never end,
Right.
So enjoy the struggle, right? Enjoy the work, enjoy the effort, and then, you can enjoy your life, but you can also be doing something that makes you feel good, right?
Exactly. Yeah. When we see progress, we feel good and we want to do more. When we feel and see failure, because we're looking for it, hence bad media, we get demotivated and we don't move forward. And that's not a way to live. No, that's not a way to live.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
Well, this was an awesome episode, a short episode, but an awesome episode. And hopefully those who are listening or watching, you're feeling a little bit inspired. Go and check out our other episodes. There's some amazing stories in there. Oh my gosh. Everything from whatever categories you care about, whether it be people, animals, or the planet, we got it all in there. And we have more to come. So please click that subscribe button. Go check out our Buy Our Coffee if you wish to support Demian and I on this podcast itself. But more importantly, go and check out the other episodes. If you're inspired by those stories, please support those organizations, because as we continue to move in heroism energy, we continue to make actual change in the world. So
well said.
Thank you for listening to the Good Viral podcast and being part of the conversation. If you are inspired by this episode, go to our website at goodviral.org, where you can find resources and listings from the episode to continue good efforts.
Like, comment, and share this episode to any or all of your social media channels. It's really easy to take a small action, and maybe you'll inspire a big result.
When good goes viral, the world gets better.